The course on risk management really focuses more on managing the strategy of the organization. It's included in the strategy piece of the whole program. And we're looking at risk not from sort of an insurance or real estate or an investment risk perspective, but really more about the strategic risks organizations face in terms of competitive advantage and designing their long-term strategies for growth or divestiture or getting into new markets, getting out of existing markets. So it's really looking at risks, uncertainties, and opportunities at the organizational level. And one of the things that I stress in this course is that without risk, there really can be no reward. A lot of times we think about risks and figure out strategies to mitigate them and avoid risks, and we tend to view risks sort of from a negative perspective. What I try to do in this course is to encourage people to think about the opportunities that a changing dynamic environment can bring. Yes, we need to think carefully about the risks and the downsides, but without that evolutionary changing process, without risk, we really don't have any opportunities for growth, for new development, for new sources of competitive advantage, to really grow our organization and move forward. When I think about risk, there are basically four broad categories of risk. We can talk about the risks that people typically think of when we hear the word risk. Things like natural disaster, economic upheaval, political upheaval, sort of those exogenous, beyond your control kind of factors. That's one category of risk, and that's not really what we focus on in the course, but it's certainly important to have an understanding of that. We can also talk about financial risk. An example there would be if your organization is heavily leveraged, changes in the interest rate or changes in how that debt structure is influencing your organization. That's an example of financial risk. Typically, those are pretty well understood, and an organization usually has policies and procedures in place to sort of handle and mitigate and really get their hands around that financial risk. The kinds of risk that we really focus on in this course really are more of a strategic risk. What happens if the demand for our product changes? What happens if the strategy of our main competitors change? How do we respond to that? Should we respond to that, or should we just keep doing what we're doing? How do we identify areas for growth? Should we invest in a new technology today, or should we wait 2 or 3 years to see if that technology is really going to pan out? To use a really outdated example, VHS versus beta. A lot of people invested in beta, and it turned out not to be the dominant technology. So that's an example of a more strategic kind of risk that relates to really the direction of where the organization is headed and what the organization wants to be. This goes back to the idea of seeing risk and opportunity really as two sides of the same coin. And when we understand risk, we can identify the information that we have, the information that we don't have that we wish we had, and we can sort of look at that information and say, yes, this is what potentially could happen. There's a downside to it, but there's also this potential upside. So rather than just reacting to a situation, having an understanding of how to manage this strategic risk will help you better identify opportunities for growth, maybe to get into a new market or to get out of a market before things go really, really badly and the demand for that product or service evaporates. How to transform your organization and really evolve and keep pace with that dynamic marketplace is really the key to capitalizing on the opportunity aspect of the risks that the business encounters.